Good morning, Dr. Rosensweet.
Good morning, Carolyn. Good to
Nice
see you.
to see you. Now you have a heart stop very quickly. Good morning to you, good morning to me, and good morning to everyone who's coming up. Here we go. Question number 1. Is it normal, Dr. Rosensweet, for a doctor to take a woman off of estradiol due to months of breakthrough bleeding? My doctor said that my estrogens are too high. Progesterone is at 4.3, which is good, but the estradiol was 101.1 and estrone via serum 114. She did this. She added estradiol and estrone levels together and said this was too high. I've never heard of this protocol before, and I'm wondering if you have. I thought I just needed my P a bit higher. I do take a slow release 200 milligram per day, added in thyroid and testosterone. But she said her concern has to do with a possible uterine cancer, as my vaginal ultrasound showed a 3 millimeter thickening. We're trying to get this breakthrough bleeding to stop. I'm postmenopause 5 years this month, and I'd appreciate any opinion. I can't speak today. I would appreciate any input that you have. Thank you.
Well, it sure is an excellent question, and it's one we meet up with very frequently, as you know as well as anybody. Let me back up. Postmenopause. This is the least of what's within this question, but I would like to emphasize that there is no such thing. It's a progressive process that begins at the age 20 plus or minus a couple years. That's when a woman's ovarian hormone output is at the absolute maximum. And then it gradually starts declining. And yeah, it undergoes a rather precipitous decline it undergoes a rather precipitous decline in the 40s or even in the 30s, but certainly in the 50s. And there's so little ovarian hormone output at that point that there's not enough, for example, there's not enough estrogen to even form an endometrial lining to be able to menstruate. And we know, of course, that the progesterone can decline earlier and deeper than the estrogen. That's part of the progress. And then once the period stops, the hormone decline doesn't stop. Yeah, it's dramatic enough to stop, not have enough estrogen to form a lining and to menstruate, but the hormones continue to decline. So when we test 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds, those hormone levels are as close to zero or zero as you can see. So there is no such thing as post-menopause.
Right.
Now, I think that nomenclature has come into play because some women stop having such raucous symptoms. They start off early in menopause with hot flashes and night sweats and sleep disturbance, and those symptoms go away. And I always consider that to be not the favorable way for things to go. Because there's a lot of women, once they start getting sleep disturbance and mood disturbance and loss of libido and loss of energy and hot flashes, that never lets up.
Right.
And I consider, paradoxically enough, these to be the most fortunate women out there because they maintain their inspiration to seek help and get those hormones replenished. It's the women who stop having symptoms that they think, oh, I made it through menopause and my menopause wasn't even hard. Well, they're still having the internal consequences of low hormones. They still lose bone. They have arterial risk that they didn't have before. They can lose their cognition. They can lose their libido. They can lose the health of their vagina, thus make intercourse painful or not possible or not desirable because their libido's gone. They can lose their muscles from loss of testosterone. those changes still take place. So my greatest concern is that the women who don't have those symptoms don't feel inspired to get hormones replenished, and they lose all that same stuff that the women who have raucous symptoms do. It's fun to watch your response. You sure get this one. You've spoken to so many women, and you know how important this is. So I know that was the least of the question that you asked there, but I thought it was important enough that I never mind repeating things if I think it's super important. Now, let's go to the question. It is possible when you replenish hormones for the dosages to be too high, and you wind up replenishing too much hormones. And very often when the dosages are excessive and you have too much hormones on board, ovarian hormones I'm talking about, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone primarily, many women will get symptoms of too much. And we have a long list, and you've published this list, and it's in our book that the women can download, of those symptoms of too much. And of course, we don't want that. Although some women can take excessive dosages and not feel too much. And in the world of hormones, sometimes excessive dosages can lead to an exaggerated sense of well-being. So sometimes those excessive dosages are embraced out there in menopause treatment land. And what this questioner has brought up is a multifaceted subject. So right now, I consider the most optimal estrogen treatment enough to protect the bones, to restore vaginal health or retain vaginal health, keep the arteries at low risk for arteriosclerosis, support the mental cognition, the ability to think, and all the multitude of hair, skin, eyes, immune system. Estrogen and immune system has now come out into the open, how important it is as one of the multiple factors in building up a strong immunity. There are so many benefits of estrogen. And what we know for most instances, and not all, it doesn't take youthful levels of estrogen to get all the benefits. In fact, the levels that it takes will not restore the period. In fact, when you get into those upper levels in which a period is sustaining or is being restored, we consider this to be not the very best optimal medicine for most, but not all women. Because the medical literature clearly points out, for example, how much estrogen must be in a woman's body to protect her bones, to protect her vagina. These numbers are well known. In fact, the laboratory that we use for 24-hour urine hormone testing has published these on each individual menopause method hormone test because they see the beauty of the science there. And then there's an upper limit. Like, what constitutes a little bit too much estrogen? For example, once a month in a young woman who's menstruating regularly, she is preparing for conceiving a baby. And the orchestration of this, as I've said so many times, it's just so astounding. It's so mind-boggling. If you don't believe in the divine, study the female menstrual cycle. You will go, oh my God, how is this orchestrated? And once a month, what happens is a woman who is having regular periods and is going to ovulate is not only preparing the endometrial lining with a rich lining to receive a potential fertilized egg, she's also preparing her breast for breastfeeding right there, every single menstrual cycle. And women can actually feel, many women can, that their breasts get more full as the cycle progresses, sometimes even tender. Well, there's actual breast glandular cells being added there. It isn't just a little bit more fluid. There's actual extra cells. And how do you get those extra cells? Through cell division, through mitosis. So a Harvard obstetrician and gynecologist once published in a medical journal that he felt that encouraging mitosis in a 50-year-old woman, plus or minus, in a menopausal woman, was not such a good idea. In other words, the estrogen levels shouldn't be so high as to get breast glandular cell proliferation. Because mitosis is a very vulnerable time in a cell life, and in a younger woman who's got a really voracious immune system, have an abnormal cell, have a mutation, no big deal. The immune system gobbles it up, spits it out, it's done. But not necessarily in 50-year-old males or females. I mention males because we have the same kind of stuff going on. So Dr. Altman, in this published paper, and this is listed in the bibliography in our book, Happy Healthy Hormones, says that he thinks that for treating women in menopause, we shouldn't get into such excessive dosages of estrogen as to cause breast glandular cell proliferation once a month. And he lists the reasons for that, and he cites the medical literature reasons for that. And we align with that too. So that's what defines what's too little and what's too much. Must protect the vagina and the bones, and at the same time not have so much estrogen that you're getting breast glandular cell proliferation once a month. Well, that amount to get breast glandular cell proliferation is precisely the amount that can also restore the period or keep the period going. So it's pretty not rocket science that a woman who's bleeding is probably having more than optimal levels of estrogen. So I agree with her doctor that these are more robust levels of estrogen than you need. Are there exceptions to this? Of course, medicine is just loaded with exceptions. There are some women that the very levels that are optimal to protect the bones in the vagina are not sufficient to address the loss of cognition. Estrogen is so instrumental in the proper functioning of the female brain, and there are some women who just need higher levels. And I've told a story about this that really drives the point home. I met a 65-year-old gynecologist, and we were both testifying in front of the National Academy of Science on the Committee for Compounding Bioidentical Hormones. And she and I went out to lunch, and she told me this story. When she was 55, she started losing her thinking ability. And it got worse and worse and worse. And she was afraid she was going to have to give up the practice of medicine in her 50s because she just couldn't remember stuff and think clearly enough. She had brain fogs. So many women can relate to that. Well, she had the added complication of her mom had dementia. And her mom's sister, thus her aunt, had dementia. So she was highly attuned and concerned about her getting dementia. And she knew the relationship of estrogen to brain function, so she started increasing her estrogen. And her mind started clearing up. And she took a little more, and her mind got clearer. And she took a little more, and her mind got clearer. In fact, when we were having lunch, she was certainly as cognitive, if not more cognitive, as I was. And what she found is that the dose needed to clear up her brain sufficiently, and here she was, 65 years old, still very much in active practice, full brick and mortar practice. She had gotten her period back. And I didn't say boo. I mean, it was such a moving story because I've heard so many women have cognitive challenges, and to hear the severity of hers, and that if it took that much estrogen to get to clear up her brain, I just had chills going up and down my spine of how beautiful that was. So I'm listing this as an exception. Nothing wrong with having a period. I mean, says a man. Excuse me. I think there's a name for this kind of mansplaining. Excuse me. I take it all back. Carolyn, can you extract that from the record, please? Strike that from the record. Mansplaining. Well, I meant medically, is what I meant. There's nothing adverse medically to having a period in your 50s and 60s and 70s. And I challenge anyone who would say estrogen causes endometrial cancer or breast cancer. The state-of-the-art book on this is by your father's friend and your childhood friend who you've met up with recently, Dr. Avram Blooming. The book is Estrogen Matters. It really speaks about estrogen and non-risk, the opposite of risk. It's the Bible on really understanding what's so medically and in the scientific literature about risk. Hormones don't cause cancer. I'm pausing on that one because I want that to really sink in. It doesn't mean that cancers don't have causes. God, they got thousands of causes. Day-to-day indiscretions in nutrition and toxicity, toxic exposure, and too much or too little exercise, and the elephant in the room, the excessive fight or flight response that so many of us have in response to the stresses of life. So cancers have causes, and sometimes they're even mysterious, and you can't even explain them. But I'm going to assert that hormones don't cause the cancers in males or females. So medically, to me, there's not a contraindication of having some bleeding, although most women by that time, they don't really want that, unless it's a case like I was describing about that doctor colleague of mine. When the gain in cognition was so wonderful for her that she did not mind having a period. And she was so grateful for the return of her brain. Now, this is rare. This is not a common thing. So there are times when we do increase the estrogen to address flailing cognition or losing cognition, and we'll bring that period back. But otherwise, we don't want the estradiol, the estrogens, the total potent estrogens, and that's what your doctor's done. She's paid attention to the two most potent estrogens, estradiol plus estrone. There is no exact math about this, but we do that in the menopause method for 24-hour urines. We add up those two estrogens, that's estradiol and estrone, because they're the most potent ones, and we don't want them too high. In most cases, again, there are exceptions. So the one thing that I'm wondering if the information's accurate, because a 3 millimeter uniform endometrial stripe on transvaginal ultrasound, and good for you to have good medical care that a transvaginal ultrasound was done. That's very important. That, to me, falls within the guidelines of a healthy endometrium. And one of the things we don't want to see is a stripe that is non-uniform, that's got some kind of bump in there that doesn't belong there. We want a uniform, thick stripe. That's called a stripe. It's really what it looks like on an ultrasound image.
Yeah.
It's really looking at the endometrium. That's what the endometrial stripe is. And so you're in the ballpark. I would respectfully disagree with the risk of endometrial cancer there. And your physician may know things that I don't know, especially about your particular situation. But you got a choice. Because when we do 24-hour urine hormone tests, I've clearly defined what the medical literature shows is not too little and not too much. And ultimately, when a woman says, gosh, I feel better, we do a 24-hour urine hormone test to confirm that she's in that optimal estrogen zone, amongst other things. And if she is, great. We just carry on ad infinitum for the whole rest of the time the woman's on the planet Earth. Yeah, don't ever let go of those hormones. Tell a man who's restored his erection at the age of 78, well, he's too old now, just stop your testosterone so you don't have to have that pesky erection. anymore because you've gone too long. Yeah, tell that to a man and see how excited they are about your medical commentary.
That pesky little thing.
So, a lot of side comments in this very poignant question. But this is the importance of individualization and really hunkering down on the details. If I had to shoot from the hip, I don't know enough about this patient, I'd retreat that amount of estrogen she's taking. I'd take it down to just less than the amount it takes to get a period or a bleed. I like that. Now, if that sacrificed cognition, then I would jack it back up, and, bring on the period. It takes a lot more robust levels of estrogen to sustain or reclaim a period in a woman who's lost that period than the levels of estrogen it takes for a young woman to have a period. In fact, when we test a woman who's gotten her period back by using robust levels of estrogen, she tests out at 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal of a 20 to 29-year-old. These are extremely robust dosages. So this is another reason I'm not a fan of what it takes to do that. But you know what? The questioner is on hormones. That's great. And like so many, it takes some tweaking. It takes some individualizations. So keep on trucking. You're getting that good thing in. You're getting some estrogen in there. And that's so important. Of course, it's imperative that you also get testosterone and you also get progesterone. Sometimes that's bleeding because you didn't have enough progesterone to balance that estrogen. And that's the final thing I want to comment on there. And Carolyn, did she mention the progesterone dose? I'm not remembering. Was she on progesterone? Did she mention it?
4 point.
Well, she's mentioning her levels, but I'm wondering if she's mentioning what she was on.
No.
So, yeah, there is a possibility that you weren't on too much estrogen.
Sorry. Slow release, 200 milligrams a day.
Yeah, that should be sufficient. That's a good prescription. So, and not only that, it's compounded in slow release. So that should be sufficient to suppress that endometrium. So it's probably related to the estrogen doses being a tweak too high. So I'd recommend reducing it because I just don't think you need that much or need that much for the long run. Again, one exception, if cognition is an issue.
Yeah. We need to think. Important. Moving on into. All right. I have total blubbed out. 5 weeks ago, I upped my dose of the Estradiol. My symptoms are gone. My hormones. But what is going on? All blubbed out. My feet are just a nightmare. And I'm wondering, Dr. R's have heard of this. Could it be water? I'm considering going down on my estrogen, and I'm very confused. My foot is a nightmare.
Wow. And once again, Carolyn, I'm just so impressed with the quality of the questions. And, how many questions have you and I considered over the last, how many years have we been doing this? 120? We started in 1902, if I remember.
Exponentially.
Oh, it's only been 3 years. Oh.
Well, we met a long time ago.
Well, we met in 1902.
Right.
We just look good. Just kidding. Yeah, excellent questions. The questioner is on the right track. You can get fluid retention from excessive estrogen or insufficient progesterone. So a common complaint of women who are on too much estrogen is they're swelling. They can see it in their ankles. They can feel it in their shoes. This particular complaint about feet, that's brand new to me. But I'm, 25 years of specializing in this. Every week I hear something new. So no surprise. And one way you can find out if you feel like putting yourself through this, I'm not recommending this. You want to find out if that's due to estrogen? Stop the estrogen. Hormones are not like some medications that people need. For example, there are people who are on blood pressure medications that I would never recommend that they just stop them abruptly. In fact, I would recommend they don't stop them abruptly. You want to really know what you're doing there. This is not true about hormones. Anyone can stop their hormones, just cut them off totally abruptly. Be taking them week upon week, month upon month, year upon year, and then one day decide not to take them and stop taking them. This is not an issue with hormones. It doesn't mean it's a great long-term strategy. You need the hormones, but you don't have to fear about abrupt stoppage. So the questioner could find out about her feet. In fact, I might recommend that she do this by stopping her hormones. Certainly stopping the estrogen. You could start with just stopping the estrogen. I'm not recommending long-term stoppage of estrogen as a strategy. I'm recommending short-term stoppage to see if the swelling is from excessive amounts of estrogen. Or, I don't know what progesterone dose this woman's on. Progesterone's a diuretic. Holy mackerel. All these hormones are so powerful and they have so many different effects. And so, if you don't have the diuretic effect of progesterone, you get to retain fluid. So my second question would be, is this woman on an adequate dose of progesterone, a rather robust dose of progesterone? And it's once again pointing out the need for individualization. There's one universal principle in medicine, in life, in menopause. Every single woman needs to be individualized. So we need to find your optimal estrogen dose. And I would recommend biased rather than pure estradiol, that's for sure. I cover that subject with very thoroughly in our book that you can download from Carolyn's Facebook page, Happy Healthy Hormones. You can download the PDF version. So I am recommending biased, but yeah. Is there too much estrogen or insufficient progesterone? Because fluid retention can be one of the symptoms of that kind of imbalance. Insufficient estrogen or excessive estrogen or insufficient progesterone. That's what I say to that woman. And be very curious if she feels like it to stop the estrogen and see if the feet swelling goes away. Now, if it goes away, it doesn't mean you don't need estrogen. If you're menopausal, even if you're perimenopausal, you definitely need estrogen. It's just a dosage thing. So you start over again. You start with a lowish dose, and you gradually increase. You alleviate symptoms of insufficiency, and you stay shy of or back down from symptoms of excess. So for you, you start low on your estrogen, gradually increase to alleviate your symptoms of insufficiency. And if you hit that foot swelling again, you've gone too high, so you back down, because there is the right amount. Your body functioned when you were younger and menstruating. Your body knows what hormonal balance is. It can take a while to get there in the process of individualizing your own hormonal dosage, but hang in there, figure it out. Once you get it, oh man, it's pretty easy to sustain it year upon year upon year, decade upon decade upon decade upon decade, because these hormones are going to help you stay on Earth and walk and talk and have intercourse if you'd like, and for decades and decades for the remainder of your time on Earth. Have bones, have muscles, think. clearly, remember, have nice arteries. So they're very important.
Oh, every comment you have an echo. I apologize.
We're working on it. Carolyn and Daryl are working on it, and we'll get it.
We will. And I promise. Next question. Love my sleep. I take progesterone, but I wake up with horrible anxiety. So should I stop it?
Well, the subject is sleep. Wow. Is it the most common question we get, Carolyn?
Close to.
I'd say sleep disturbance is right up there at the top of the mountain of the number of deleterious effects of not having ovarian hormones. There's a couple major components of sleep. And in a perimenopausal or menopausal aged woman who's having sleep disturbance and she didn't have it when she was younger, the very first thing you want to think about is hormones. Now, there are other causes of sleep disturbance, but if you didn't have it before and now you have it and you're in the perimenopause and menopause, insufficient ovarian hormones is such a common cause. And I can't tell you how many women who aren't sleeping get their hormones individualized and balanced, get right and optimal dosages, and they're sleeping again. And oh my, how happy they are, how grateful they are. And let me mention the two components of ovarian relationship to sleep. Progesterone is the big calmer, which is very different than every other hormone you can name. All the rest of the hormones, estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, thyroid, these are animators. These can be recruited for fight or flight even. They increase the energy and the focus. And not progesterone, it's the great calmer. It's one of the main reasons why women who are pregnant and they have these astronomically high progesterone levels, so many women feel this extraordinary calm. And not all the time necessarily, but a lot of the time. And they seem so peaceful. Progesterone, the great calmer. And as I said many times, if I knew the correct dose of progesterone to inject intravenously into a woman or myself, we could be put to sleep so deep surgery could be performed on us. That's how calming progesterone is. Well, one of the most common things that happens to women in the perimenopause can be as early as your 30s. The progesterone starts declining deeper and faster than the estrogen does. And you can start having sleep disturbance related to insufficient progesterone even in your 30s, or more commonly in your 40s, or certainly in your 50s. Progesterone. The very first thing I think of when a menopausal woman is having sleep issues is to get that progesterone dose right and spend the time to do it. We know how to do it. We start low and we gradually increase. And we're looking for the woman to say, oh my God, I took my progesterone at bedtime and I slept beautifully. We're looking for that dose because very often that'll be the thing that does it. Now, there's an estrogen deficiency common in sleep problems as well. And it's very prevalent. And it seems like the female body does not like low estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
And holds low estrogen to be stressful and capable of triggering the biology of the stress response. So if you're cruising through the day and you have a hot flash, well, you're awake, you're conscious, you're busy, you override it, you just go on with what you're doing. You may fan yourself or may even have to change your clothes, but you just muscle on through. But if you get a hot flash in the middle of the night, that's very stressful to the female body, and it triggers the biology of fight or flight. And you may awaken and not feel the hot flash, but it occurred. The low estrogen alarm bell went off, and you triggered the output of the major stress hormones called adrenaline and cortisol. And there you are, 2 a.m., you wake up, you're animated, your mind is racing, it's this full of thoughts, and you can hardly control them because you triggered the biology of the stress response and you got a shot of adrenaline. I know this one from the inside out. 4 times a year in college and in medical school, true confessions, midterms and finals, I needed to stay up pulling all-nighter the night before. And we used what back in the day were called diet pills. I didn't know what they were, but I took a diet capsule. In the evening when I started to get tired the night before a big exam. And oh my mind woke up terrifically. Wow, I could stay awake and alert and just gobble up that information all night long, right on through the next day's test, at which point I would crash. And what that was an artificial adrenaline. So I know for certain that the adrenaline can really wake up that mind and get it racing. And it can make that you can have so much adrenaline, you can get heart palpitations, you can get racing pulse. This has sent many women in the middle of the night to the emergency room. They're having such strong heart palpitations that they're having some chest discomfort. They're concerned they're having a heart attack. It's not. It's the fight or flight response, led by adrenaline, causing all these changes. My own sister had in the middle of the night, she had a coronary arteriogram because she was having palpitations in the middle of the night. And her arteries were clean. It was low hormones, low estrogen principally. So I'm trying to make the case that if you have low estrogen, that can also give you sleep disturbance. And the kind that the questioner described, that's an important distinction there, that racing mind and that panic or palpitations in the middle of the night, that's a symptom of estrogen deficiency. The moral of the story is always the same, and it leads you to this exact same job, is you need to have your own hormonal program individualized. Because every woman on earth is just like every man. We differ. We look like humans. Women look like women, men look like men. However, we vary. Wide ranges of what the right amount of this or that is for us as an individual. The range is quite significant. Like the average amount of bias, for example, that in my practice, that satisfies most women and gets them symptom-free as far as estrogen deficiency goes, is 1.7 milligrams of estradiol equivalent. In order to understand that term, read our book. But there's a range. Some women do really well as low as 0.8, and some women need as much as 2.6, and some women even need higher than that. That's quite a range. It speaks to the individual differences woman to woman. No problem. In menopause medicine, for those who are really experienced with it, we know our primary task is to figure it out for each individual woman. Not hard. When you know that. One dose does not fit all. No, we just individualize it. So there's 2 components of sleep disturbance, and the thing that sounds like it's really dogging this particular questionnaire sounds to me like an estrogen deficiency as well. But as far as sleep goes, you want to get that estrogen right, and you want to get that progesterone right. And if you download our book, we describe a process to do just that.
I will, Carol, send it to you.
Great. So, yeah.
Yeah. Moving part.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, we're good. What causes high estrogen that will cause breast cancer? And do you want to take estrogen blockers to prevent that?
Wow. I love it that this question comes up almost every week, because it is the elephant in the room. And the fear there is estrogen or high estrogen causes breast cancer. And I highly recommend that women in perimenopause and menopause really get the truth about this one. In order to do so, you may have to read the book Estrogen Matters by Avram Bluming, MD, an oncologist specializing in breast cancer, and Carol Tavris, PhD. Estrogen Matters. And Carolyn, perhaps you'd be willing to post a link to that book, because doctors Bluming and Tavris have really gone deep into the science around risk for breast cancer and its possible relationship to hormones. Why in the world would they do that? Because some false information exploded onto the world public in 2002. Before that time, there was not concern about hormones and causing cancer. And women have been treated with hormones in massive amounts since the 1950s. Massive. There was 18 million women, American women in America. American women usually are in America. There might be exceptions to that. That was 40% of all American women in menopause were being treated with hormones. Except that changed drastically and dramatically in 2002 because of the publication in a medical journal of a scientific study that stated in their conclusions that women treated with Prempro, not Premarin, which is pure horse urine-derived estrogen, Prempro, which is a combination of Premarin plus a molecule very different than the bioidentical progesterone. It's a progestin, it's called, Prempro. It falsely stated that there was an implication of increased risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. Falsely stated. Anyone who read the study very quickly encountered this statement within the study, that the increased risk reported was statistically insignificant. That's very meaningful. In the world of medicine and science, when we see the word statistically insignificant, we know that that's junk. That means there is no significance to it. Rigorous science, no significance. But that's not what the press got a hold of. And they exploded it out onto the American public, and before you knew it, you had widespread terror of women taking hormones and healthcare providers prescribing them. And it's universal, and it's stuck to this very day. I read the study right away. I was alarmed, but I saw so many problems in the study, and I already knew the European literature, which showed reduced risk. And then I also saw that by 2000, I saw that statistically insignificant. I went, what are they reporting this study for? And then by 2006, this study continued. They stopped treating women, but the study continued. They kept evaluating the 16,000 plus women that they were using as their cohort. And by 2006, they saw the risk had reduced to 1.0, which means there was no increased risk at all. They knew that by 2006. They knew originally that the 1.26 was statistically insignificant, but they went and reported the thing anyway. Over the vociferous complaints of many on that study committee. That's a whole story. Dr. Bluming recounts that story in the book. And then finally, by 2017, the exact same original study committee reported in the exact same original journal of the American Medical Association that after 18 years of follow-up, there was no increased risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. How many American and worldwide women know that, heard of that study? They heard of the original 2002 study. They have not heard of the retraction of that, the findings of that study published by the same committee in 2017. The word is leaking out there so slowly, but if you interview women as I do daily, or you interview healthcare providers, they still believe that estrogen can cause cancer. Falsely reported in the Women's Health Initiative. And I want to address what the true science is in here. Number one, all of us, male and female, are vulnerable to thousands of medical diagnoses. Some of them not good and challenging to overcome. And as human beings, we're all, male and female, we're vulnerable to cancer. We can get cancer. And there's reasons for that. So we're all at risk for cancer. And as a man, I'm at special risk for prostate cancer. And there's reasons why I have a special increased risk for prostate cancer. I'm not going into those right now. And as women are at special risk for breast cancer, and ovarian cancer, and uterine cancer. And there's reasons for that risk. And yet here's the science. Women, and for that matter men, who are treated with hormones are at less risk for having breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who are not treated with hormones. Less risk, women who are treated with hormones. That's the science. So I want to address that right out of the gate because there's an incorrect scientific statement being made right at the beginning of that question, yet I understand it because it's the greatest misconception that I'm aware of in my world, and it's prevailed since 2002, and the poison is still out there, and that's very, very damaging to women, and it's damaging to women, it's damaging to the planet Earth, because this Earth needs a heck of a lot more feminine energy. It needs women in more positions of decision in their own families, their own communities, in politics, all over the place. So our whole menopause method, as our core vision, is to support women in restoring their health and thus getting feminine energy to rise in prevalence on this planet. That's at the foundation of what we do and what drives my team and what inspires my team. My beloved partners, Andre and Joshua and Sherry, Jennifer, and the whole team in there. That's what drives us, is we want to see the restoration of feminine energy on this planet. So we want to see millions. Even now, there's probably 7 million women, American women, in menopause on hormones. Over half of them are on compounded bioidentical hormones. There was 18 million in 2002, so we got a long way to go. And it's one of the reasons I love doing this Facebook Live, because as many women as we can influence and over this particular question and try and antidote that tremendous fear, or let me refer you, or Carolyn refer you to Dr. Blooming's book, Estrogen Matters, where the subject of risk is covered so thoroughly. In fact, I keep it on my bookshelves in a prominent place. If you look over my shoulder, there it is. It's that white book right underneath that microscope on the top shelf. That's Estrogen Matters, sitting right next to our book, Happy Healthy Hormones. There it is, Estrogen Matters. The science about risk. Again, we're all at risk, but women who are treated with hormones are at less risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who are untreated. Men who are treated with testosterone are at less risk for prostate cancer than men who are not treated with testosterone. Makes sense. These things are so important for our health. It's ridiculous. Now, there was more to her question. Yeah, what causes high estradiol? Well, all of these hormones are some of the most potent biochemicals in our body. They have profound and multi-organ effects. Strong like nothing else. What's next? Maybe neurotransmitters are that strong. They're not, I don't think they're as strong as hormones, but the hormones are the strongest thing we got. They're capable of mobilizing us to run away from a saber-toothed tiger or stand there and fight it, or whatever the modern day version of the stress of yesterday or today. Yesterday was and today will be. Same process. And when we think of hormones and stress, I think the very first thing that should come to your mind is adrenaline and cortisol. These are at the vanguard. But all the energizing hormones are recruited. That means thyroid hormone is called into action. And so is estrogen and testosterone from a woman's ovaries. These are excellent stress hormones. When you look at young women Olympic athletes, a lot of these women are not menstruating. Their rigorous, or shall we say excessive training programs are so stressful to them, they're recruiting their estrogen to head down the preparation for the Olympics pathway at the expense of their female pathway, and they stop menstruating. And a lot of women that you see in the Olympics, they are not menstruating because they've recruited their estrogen for the stress response. And this is where I was heading. How does a woman's estrogen get high when she's young? Stress. So women can get the effects of high and unbalanced estrogen. She can get increased breast tenderness. She can get menstrual cramps. She can get PMS. These are overstimulatory effects by excessive amounts of estrogen, not balanced by progesterone. She can get fibrocystic breast disease from constant overstimulation of the breast. That's not a healthy situation for the breast. So how do you get high estrogen? There's probably estrogen secreting tumors, though I'm not an expert in tumors and I'm not remembering one. There's ovarian tumors that may, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on this, but I don't believe there are estrogen secreting tumors. They're not common. There's prolactin secreting tumors, there's cortisol secreting tumors, there's adrenal hormone secreting tumors, but I'm not remembering that there's estrogen secreting tumors. So I'm not going to necessarily count that, although I wouldn't rule it out. But the most common cause is an excessive biological response to stress. I say excessive because so many things that we're internally stressed about, we probably could be far more mellow about if we were more enlightened, to give the short version. If we were connected to the bigger picture, like we're a spark of the divine and we're living energy of love and everything's going to be okay. And, stresses are useful for building our character and strengthening us. If we were enlightened, but, we're on the path to that. So we can recruit excessive amounts of estrogen. How do you get that estrogen down? Well, you acquire information, tools, and support. You go into therapy with someone that you trust who knows a lot about emotions and the mind. You go into group processes. You go into some of the 12-step programs. They're all over the place. There's millions of Americans who are acquiring, people worldwide, not just America, who are chosen courageously to face their own internal pain and seek help, seeking information, tools, and support that can help them with this. There's a lot of resources on the internet, but there's nothing like that in that personal session or the group session. Wow, I've learned so much in groups. Feels a little daunting, feels a little scary, feels like you're walking on to the skinny branches to go to group therapy. But oh my God, it can be life-changing. And it's reachable, it's affordable. You can go to Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or Codependence Anonymous. And you can learn a lot. Not only that, you're going to meet up with a lot of people who are openly talking about their internal emotional pain and giving out skills and mutual support and love to assist you in healing this internal emotional pain. Because high estrogen, high stress hormones, you got to get the information and tools to deal with the cause. Now let me tell you the cause as I see it. That we're all walking each other home, as someone has described, I think Ram Dass, to the truth of who we are. And there's an assertion there that the truth of who we are is we're a spark of the divine manifesting. To put it one way, we're connected, we're linked to the divine. And for those who feel that and know that, this world feels like love and peace and joy and miracle. But we're on a journey. It's one of the reasons we've come to Earth, if not the principal reason, to go on a process to become fully awakened so that we're conscious and feeling of our direct connection to the divine. And it feels like love. It feels like happiness. It feels like easy. I always like to think of it as that famous biblical statement, I am.
That I am.
Yes. And it's my I am, that when I'm in my I am, everything is good. I'm as home as deeply as I know how to be. That's called non-stressful, to put it mildly. In fact, it feels like peace and love and joy the deeper any of us can arrive at I am. But what does it feel like to not be aware of that connection, to not feel it? We feel like there's something wrong, and it feels like fear, or it feels like there's something wrong with us, which is shame. Or it gets us upset and we project it out and someone's doing it to us and we get angry at them because they're making us not feel good. Oh boy, there's an epidemic of that on this planet right now that's so destructive. Someone else is the cause of my problems. Wrong. And so that's what it feels like to be separate from the divine. So the process of healing requires that we awaken to what's actually going on in us. And what we're going to find is because we've avoided and repressed this fear, sadness, anger, shame, and guilt so long, that what can be going on is we're not aware of it, we repressed it, we don't want to deal with it, and we're acting it out. Or we're repressing it internally, and it's wreaking havoc with our physical health and our hormones. So the practice becomes how to identify what emotional pain I came to Earth with and I've been dealing with my whole life. And how do I address it in an effective way? And one of the techniques that I recommend this practice to you is you just close your eyes, feel what's going on, feel your emotions. And if you encounter fear or sadness, breathe and feel, breathe and feel, breathe and feel. That's a process of acceptance. You're getting more inclusive. You're getting more, the truth will set you free. You're encountering the truth of part of what's going on inside yourself. And you're accepting it. And you're building your muscle for unconditional love, because that's what acceptance is. It's accepting yourself, including the parts that are hurting. So that's the short version. And you want to acquire the information and tools and support so that you don't jack up your estrogen levels and recruit it for the stress response. Well, you won't be able to jack them up forever. You'll wear down those ovaries and you will not be having excessive estrogen. But I would not recommend tamoxifen as a remedy for separation from the divine, which is the cause. And Carolyn, it is a hard stop for me today. I have got to bow out. And what a pleasure, as always. What a pleasure to hang out with you, Carolyn. It's such a, we get to hang out here. I always get to experience you, and I'm really grateful for this connection that we have, and for everyone who joins us here. And I am going to sign off. Oh my, Carolyn, do you want to say anything before I actually cut us out of here?
Love to you. Love to everybody. Next time, maybe you can hear me correctly.
All right, everybody.
Enjoy Thursday.
All righty. Bye-bye.